My name's Pete Woods, you're watching Hexhamtv. Who are you and where are we?
Hello, I'm Jamie Driscoll. I'm the newly elected North of Tyne Mayor, and this is the office of the Combined Authority. So I took office on Tuesday, and there was a brief flurry of media interest, but then it's actually been getting down to the job. And that's involved meeting people across community sectors. Some businesses already been up in Northumberland with Arkinova, looking at what they're doing, seeing how we can support them. That's a wonderful business, bringing really high quality jobs to rural Northumberland, which is very, very important. I mean, they're going from, I think, about 130 to 310 scientific posts within the next few years. That's wonderful, and so much to do. I mean, this is a new authority, skeleton staff. We've got to get all of that up and running, and of course start dealing with implementing everything that was in the manifesto.
Well, firstly, congratulations on being elected, Jamie. And you, after you were elected, you immediately announced that there was a climate change emergency, and you were adopting that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and why you considered it was important to make that announcement?
Absolutely. A lot of people have heard about this by now, but in October last year, the United Nations, the IPCC branch of the United Nations, produced a report, said that unless we limit global warming to a degree and a half, to do that requires getting carbon emissions down by 2030, then we hit a tipping point. And even areas now where we might think we're in a temperate climate, extreme weather events will be worse. We will see massive amounts of soil erosion, and we're going to see sea levels rising. Now, this sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie, you know what? And on a day-to-day basis, we can't quite see it. So unless we lay down that marker that this is an emergency and we need to act, it will be too late. I've got two kids who are 11 and 13. I don't want to leave them a world that is barely inhabitable. So this is going to be a huge body of work where we, as the North of Tyne Authority, will be convening a climate change liaison group, and that's working with the existing local authorities, the public sector, businesses, community groups, to see what we can do together to make sure we get our emissions down to that target of net zero by 2030.
So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, putting it mildly, but an emergency is an emergency. We do have to take this seriously.
So presumably policies that the Combined Authority come up with in the future will bear that statement in mind and actually make this happen. It won't just be words. That's
absolutely correct, yeah. The Combined Authority, actually, in terms of how much that we're responsible for public sector delivery, is quite small. The healthcare remains with the hospitals, education remains with the schools and universities, emptying the bins remains with the local councils. Our role is very much a leadership and coordination role, which is a role I'm very excited about taking on, but that does require us to provide leadership in things like how do we tackle a climate emergency. Now, this is something that early in the campaign, it took a long time to get elected, but our policies were out there about this right at the beginning. And in that time, actually, there are now 60, I think we're the 60th local authority, to have declared a climate emergency. And just last week, Parliament did. Now, there's one thing to say we have a climate emergency, there's quite another to pull the plans in place to do it. And that's going to involve looking at things like the planning system, delivering a lot more in terms of green energy, how we set up our buildings and workplaces so that people don't have to travel as much, so that may involve people working more at home, which is probably positive. A lot of people might like that. Some jobs, obviously, that's not possible. And making sure that we're doing what we can to produce all of our energy from renewable sources. And up here, we actually have a fairly good start in terms of the industrial infrastructure that we have. We're actually one of the few places that actually manufacture solar panels. We've got a great history of offshore wind and onshore wind, and all of these things. It's a massive planning task, but it has to be done.
Now, the North of Tyne Combined Authority covers Northumberland, Newcastle and North Shields. How do you intend to work with those local authorities that are surrounding the North of Tyne Combined Authority? Because many things that you may want to do will be northeast focused. Have you made any approaches to those authorities to try and get them involved, or to say that you're open to working with them in the future?
Yes, there are meetings being set up with those authorities, and prior to being elected, I'd met with a lot of those. They're all at the moment Labour authorities, so people I knew and had good relationships with. I'm not going to announce here some of the results of that because obviously there's a process to go through with this, but we will be working together on transport, because one of the briefs is that the transport with, obviously when you've got something like the Tyne and Wear Metro, half of it's north of the Tyne, half of it's south of the Tyne, and that's run by Nexus, and it's all of the local authorities are actually involved in that. So the Transport Committee has a brief to improve public transport. Part of that is putting together the case to get more money out of central government, and that's something that is to some extent already in train and has been announced, and that I'll be involved with as the Mayor.
And you mentioned that the role of the Mayor is very much a sort of leadership and coordinating sort of role. The budget of the combined authority, some would say, is fairly slim for such a wide brief. The role of the Mayor will be encouraging more investment into the region. How successful do you think you will be in doing that?
You're absolutely right. £20 million a year doesn't even begin to cover the dent that we've lost from cuts to public services, schools, public transport and everything. But it is an opportunity to get more money out of central government. And part of the role of the authority is putting together those business cases and saying that, if you give us X amount of millions of pounds for this, we will invest it in such and such a way, and that will generate more jobs, which in turn generates more tax revenue and more economic benefits. And that includes things like education and skills. So at the moment we have £20 million a year, which is what's called the investment fund, and that runs the authority and the work we're doing. Beyond that, we're hoping next year to have adult education devolved, for example, and that's at the moment an extra £23 million, which we will be able to manage rather than it being managed from Whitehall, because I'm a firm believer that it's the people in those locations who actually know best what they need, and that will involve us coordinating it here. And if you look at what other combined authorities of this nature have done, some of them have greater transport powers, some of them have greater powers to do with different forms of education, apprenticeships and things like that, and some in time have gone on to have health. Now that may not be something that we approach, but one of the things is going to government for more money for things like an educational challenge to help improve our schools.
Now, you're not the first Mayor with devolved responsibilities around the country. Have you visited any other places that have got a Mayor and spoken to any of those mayors to sort of perhaps look at best practice that might be able to come to the northeast? Yeah,
we've got a few. We've had a few phone calls, and there's a few meetings will be in the diary. In the 3 days I've been in the job, no, I haven't been outside of the northeast. There's a lot to do here. But it's funny, you talk about best practice. I mean, one of the things we were talking about on the campaign trail is we should set up a department for not reinventing the wheel. There's so much good work done, even locally as well, and it's about scaling that up. And everything in the manifesto was based on a model that's worked somewhere already and bringing these really good ways of doing things here.
And we've got tremendous resources in the northeast, haven't we? We've got some wonderful universities, got some great businesses, and great people, great workers. How do you think you might work with the university sector in the future?
Well, it's funny actually, because when I was a backbench councillor in Newcastle, Monument Ward covered both universities and a whole range of businesses, as well as a lot of public sector institutions. We had a very good relationship with the university, and particularly their careers service, because one of the things that universities want is obviously graduates to be getting good jobs. So that goes kind of hand in glove with working with the businesses, working with the skills sector, but also making sure that the university students have an opportunity at an early stage to build those links with local communities, local businesses, because we want good, bright people to be staying here and building their lives here.
So Hexhamtv is based in a rural part of your the North of Tyne Combined Authority in Hexham. How do you propose in the future, and as I say, I appreciate it's early days, but how do you propose to work with those rural communities and those market towns, many of whom are suffering with difficulty with retail premises, retail companies moving on, and some lack of investment?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, just in terms of priorities, on the wall in my office we've got a massive map that shows, and you look at the area of the North of Tyne Combined Authority, and you've got, you know, Newcastle and North Tyneside and a little bit of South East Northumberland here, and then the rest of it is huge, and that's there to remind me every day of the scale of this area and rural Northumberland. So some of the challenges is actually about, for example, connectivity. And connectivity is, yes, people being able to move around, but it's the digital infrastructure. So we're hoping soon to have something in place, and you know, as ever, this requires central government sign-off. But we are working to get full fibre broadband available to rural Northumberland to support a whole range of things. I mean, not just businesses, but you know, community groups and individuals, because we all recognise the internet's become a bigger and bigger part of our lives. Already a huge part of our lives, but so many services are going to be delivered through the internet in the future. And when it comes to rural retail, then actually it's the same in most urban areas. Once you get away from Newcastle city centre, you look at a lot of urban areas peripheral to the city centre, and they're struggling as well. And it is undeniable that more and more people are shopping online. So it's got to be, to some extent, about reinventing what city centres and town centres are for. I mean, I did some work with NE1, the Business Improvement District, when I was a backbench councillor there, and we had some discussions. And it's very much about rethinking about what town centres are for. So it's not the case that you go in, you buy something and you leave. It's got to be a place of community, of leisure, and actually a place where you can spend time. And somewhere you can go and not spend money as well, because you know, a lot of people don't have much money. And you know, as an economic model, it can't just be about spending money, but then there's a lot of opportunities for businesses there, because once people are in a place, you know, everybody knows what they're after is footfall. And so if we've got vibrant town centres, that's great for a community sustainability, social sustainability, as well as the economic sustainability.
And I know you've only been in post for 3 days, but if I was to ask you, what one thing really excites you about the next 5 years as Mayor of the North of Tyne Combined Authority?
The sheer scope of the job, the ability to bring everything together, because you know, we do have a massive environmental challenge, but there's deprivation across this region, in the urban areas and the rural areas. There's a lot of people with a huge amount of talent and energy, and it's getting the opportunity to work with all those people and bring it together. And you know, it's just that chance to really do something that's going to make a difference here. And it's hard to put that into words, but it's just a huge body of work, and actually some great people here already. We've kind of got a skeleton organisation in place. You know, we're a new authority. I'm a new mayor. It's a new institution, but I've met some great people, and I think we're going to be able to do some good work.
Jamie Driscoll, Mayor of North of Tyne Combined Authority, thanks very much for talking to Hexhamtv.
Thank you.